for those of us who have been kind of working in this area for a long time, it was tremendously helpful to see the work of the TRC come out. It clarified expectations. It gave us names for things, gave us words to put on ideas. For me, they would have been growing in an informal way. And I think I actually went back and reread through their recommendations to try and think about how I would address this. And it seems to me that what I took from it, and that really the ideas that I had that coalesced around that, had to do with recognizing the Indigenous communities as people with a long-term commitment to place, long-term commitment to the interaction between culture and place that has evolved over time and is expressed today. And in our education system, in our legal and policy systems around use of resources, we tend to acknowledge things more than people. So as an example, when I was working on the scientific panel for sustainable forest practices in Clayoquot Sound, we found that archaeological sites, so the remains of ancient Indigenous people on the landscape, whether it was a rock shelter or rock art or a fishing site, archaeological sites had legal standing. They had they were recognized in policy. They were recognized in practices. If you found these things, you were supposed to protect them. But living Indigenous people didn't, right? There was the fact that a living person on the landscape today who held a lineage of names that was tied to a particular place on the landscape that made that place on the landscape sacred to them, that wasn't recognized in forest policy. The sacred place on the landscape that didn't have a physical manifestation in rocks and wood and that sort of thing didn't have a recognition. And so for me, a lot of this has been about trying to put the people back in their rightful place in the system. And if you look at the TRC recommendations about education, about healthcare, about the connections between culture and place, all of that is tied around recognizing people, recognizing the place of people, recognizing the rights of people, recognizing their connections back in time, connections across space to different communities, families, etc. And so for the last 15 or so years of my career, those kinds of issues have become much more on the front burner, whereas there was sort of context for me to look at ecosystems in the past. They really became my primary interests over in kind of the final years of my career. That drove the decisions we made in the Hakai network, that drove other projects that I've been working on. And I think it's important for people like me, people working in science, to work hard to try and understand that particular social context for the work that they're doing. If we're working in Indigenous territories, we need to understand and work in the context of the Indigenous people whose territories those are, and that has ramifications throughout what we do.